Last year's general election produced the most unexpected result in a generation. Opinion polls have pointed to an incredibly close contest. Pundits, forecasters and the politicians thought a hung parliament was inevitable. As we now know, they were all wrong. Before the election, I uncovered a series of statistical patterns that suggested that things weren't quite as they seemed. Looking at things like historical patterns, local elections, by-elections, and what people thought of the leaders, I was convinced that the headline numbers were wrong. But how were the polls so far off? In short, politics in the last parliament was very unusual. 2/3 of 2010 Liberal Democrats abandoned the party. The pollsters got that right. But they thought more would vote Labour than Tory. They were also right in thinking UKIP's vote share would quadruple, but wrong in thinking that it would hurt the Tories much more than Labour. And so that's how pollsters ended up implying this result in May 2015. After the election, I dug into the results and found the Conservatives were gaining more votes from the Lib Dems than the pollsters had thought, and Labour was losing more support to UKIP than the polls had indicated. The whole narrative around the changes in the British political landscape was wrong. But why? To measure public opinion, pollsters don't ask everybody. A sample of even 1,000 people can be enough to give an accurate estimate. But the sample must be representative or made representative. To do this, pollsters put more weight on types of voter they have too few of and less weight on voters they have too many of. This time around, the sampling process went wrong. The British election study, conducted after every general election, uses a different method.
Unlike a conventional polling, where you would say call 1,000 people and then reweight them so they looked a bit like the population, we drew a set of addresses more or less out of a hat, and then we went to those houses and interviewed the people who happened to live there. And the end result of this is that first you get a sample that looks a lot more like the general population without reweighting, and secondly, for political purposes, the number of people who said they voted for each party looks almost exactly the same as the general election result, unlike most of the pre-election polls.
My analysis suggests that they ended up with too many politically engaged people. Sampling was behind the error. The younger respondents weren't representative of their age group. It's as if they were putting too much weight on Twitter users with a political axe to grind. People that voted for one of the coalition parties in 2010 and switched to an opposition party were overrepresented. By contrast, those that voted Conservative in 2010 and stayed loyal in 2015 were underrepresented.
In simple terms, we need more people who don't engage with politics in any way, who don't engage with politics, who don't vote. We overestimated the turnout at the election, so we'll be wanting to do a better job on that next time around.
A huge challenge will be polling for Britain's EU membership referendum. The electorate will vote across party lines, making pollsters' weighting methods less effective than in an election. This places an even greater premium on getting a representative sample. Pollsters have been examining their panellists' political activity, browsing habits, and even whether they watch Newsnight. If they're going to get this right, pollsters really need to work towards more representative samples.